Happy to be here with Dirk Sauer of Novartis. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
We've had some disappointing clinical trial results in ophthalmology over the past year. Novartis is delivering some positive news. Can you give us an update on RTH258?
Yeah. So at this Congress, we will present the key data of two phase 3 studies, pivotal trials, the HAWK and the Harrier trial, which are basically global trials running worldwide. We have finished the first year of these trials earlier this year in June, and we had a press release where we basically talked to the visual outcomes. So we have non-inferiority versus aflibercept with respect to visual acuity, and what the main message was then was that we were able to spread out the injection time for more than half of the patients to 3 months.
Wow.
Rather than 2 months. So that is the key message with respect to the visual acuity and the injection frequency outcome. At this Congress, we will present the anatomical data, which haven't been presented before. I'm very excited about that because I think these data clearly show that we are differentiated from what is currently approved with respect to anti-VEGF. So we will show a clear differentiation versus aflibercept. And we will also have a press release on this tomorrow.
Great. So can you speak generally as to how the timeline for this may play out, when you may go to the FDA and what may come after that?
Yeah, so we had to tweak a little bit the manufacturing process. So that is all done. But as you know, you have to produce stability data in that case, and so we will submit to the FDA as well as to European authorities and most likely also Japan by end of next year. We have had meetings with FDA and with the EMA where we discussed this submission process, and we have full agreement, so we are fully on track for that time.
How would you describe the process in terms of regulatory approval at this point? Is it easier than it had been in the past? Are there more challenges than there were before? You hear different opinions of drug developers working with the FDA. That things seem to be improving.
Yeah, I think it depends what you want to do and show. So I think if you do something like we did, where you go for non-inferiority and look at other differentiating factors, non-inferiority with respect to visual acuity, and look for other differentiating factors, it's relatively straightforward, because there are clear guidelines by the FDA what you have to show, and EMA has similar guidelines, so that's straightforward. I think where it gets more difficult is if you have a combination therapy and want to show an increase in visual acuity. So want to differentiate based on visual acuity outcome. I think that's much more challenging, and I think the bar is pretty high. So we may have to look for different endpoints there. I'm not sure whether change in BCVA is the best way to describe that. We had some discussions, preliminary discussions with FDA on that, and I think they understand as well that we may have to look for other things. But of course that will be more difficult because you have to establish new outcome measures, which is always a challenge.
I was going to ask, are there unique challenges for ophthalmology in running these clinical trials and getting FDA approval? Are the endpoints perhaps more precise than in other fields? What are the challenges that are unique to ophthalmology in this process?
I think it depends a lot what field you're talking about. If you take retina, as I said, the bar is pretty high because of the anti-VEGF working very well.
Sure.
Similarly in glaucoma, it's not so easy because also there you have very good treatments which will be genericized or are already genericized, so that's difficult as well. I think in other areas like dry eye or areas of high unmet need like geographic atrophy or intermediate AMD or retinitis pigmentosa, I think it's easier because also there is the understanding of the agencies that there is a high need, and I think they support to do clinical trials there. If you go in completely untapped areas like we do with our presbyopia treatment, then again it gets very challenging because you have to completely define it from scratch. And we also had health authority interactions there, and that there it was clear, you know, that it is not so easy to really agree on what is the right way to look at these things. So it really depends on the area you
really
work in.
have to find that sweet spot between
Exactly.
too many drugs and no drugs or no parameters at all.
Yeah, I think there's enough unmet need in ophthalmology.
Sure.
And I also think, you know, ophthalmology is very well, it's actually in principle it's easier to do trials there because the eye is pretty accessible. You usually don't deal with systemic side effects, right? You are very local.
Sure.
And so that, for example, makes it a very good target for gene therapy. And we see, you know, how much is going on in that field. So I think in principle the eye is a very good organ to study.
Because there's no placebo effect either. I mean, you can measure, when you do measure vision, you can see the difference, you can measure pressure, you can measure, everything is...
But for example, if you do dry eye, you have a very high placebo
That's a good
effect.
point. Yeah, that's a good point. So how would you've been obviously in this field for a long time, how would you assess the past 10 years of innovation in ophthalmology?
Yeah, I would say the past 10 years was probably the decade of the retina. Because that was really where the action was, right? With the appearance of anti-VEGF, with the really change, you know, with respect to patient outcome, a lot of research, a lot of development went into the retina area. I think what has been shown recently is that it is not so easy. It's, you know, we had a couple of disappointments. I mean, we ourselves with Vista had a pretty disappointment. So I think, you know, the field is moving a bit. I mean, it's really more moving to the areas of high unmet medical need, which includes retina, like geographic atrophy, intermediate AMD, but which also includes completely other areas. I mean, I find, you know, presbyopia very interesting. I find the myopia area very interesting. You know, juvenile myopia, I think is a big challenge, especially in Asia. So I think there are new areas coming up, which I think that we will see more research and more development in the next couple of years. So I'm not saying retina will go away, but it may slow down a bit and it may be focused on the high unmet need areas, and other areas will be explored more.
Well, that leads into my final question, just looking ahead 10 years. What do you see happening in ophthalmology? Perhaps the areas that will be addressed, but also new technologies inside of pharmaceuticals, outside of pharmaceuticals. What has you excited about the next 10 years?
As I said, I mean, I'm excited about looking into new areas, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as I mentioned. So I think this is something where, you know, also at Novartis, we are very much interested in, to look into these areas of high unmet medical need. Then I think the whole technology around OCT will evolve further, and we will be able to do more and more. I think we will be probably able to predict much better patient outcome based on initial OCT measures. So we, for example, have a big collaboration with the University of Vienna on that topic. And I think, you know, we might be able to generate algorithms which the physician can use to actually predict patient outcome, predict, you know, frequency, treatment frequency for a given patient. So I think that will change. I think the whole digital area will become more and more important. So, you know, basically creating applications which can be used in clinical trials. I think ophthalmology is also well suited there because, you know, you can have applications on the iPhone or the iPad, and, you know, the eyes are, you know, directly linked to these digital media. So I think it's a very interesting area, and we are also investing into that at Novartis. So I think these are the main areas I see. I think ophthalmology will continue to be a highly interesting and highly dynamic area. So something I enjoy to be in very much.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to tracking your progress in ophthalmology, and we appreciate you taking a few minutes today.
Okay. You're welcome. Thanks.
Thanks.